the Breakfast Show. This morning, we're asking you to give peas a chance. And you can do this with a seed network. Now, if you haven't heard of a seed network, you'll be able to learn a whole lot more. As of this weekend, we now have one in Malaysia.
Yes, a seed network basically encourages people, even you at home, to learn how to save and exchange local seeds and use a wide range of vegetables and fruit seeds in your garden.
Yeah, now, besides improving your nutrition, of course, efforts like this help locate, multiply, and distribute thousands of local food plant varieties that may have otherwise disappeared.
So joining us this morning to explain how this all works are the co-founders of the Seedsavers network in Australia. We have Jude and Michel Fanton, and the co-founder of Eats, Shoots and Roots, Sabina of Eats.
Welcome
Good morning.
to the show, guys.
Hello, Hanson.
But tell us how this concept of seed saving all came about.
Well, 26 years ago in Australia, we were encouraged to start up a similar organisation to one we'd heard of in America to save our traditional varieties of food plants. Australia has been ravaged by a large-scale farms, and so there were a lot of diversity was being lost at the time. So we mounted a rescue operation to save the traditional varieties of the seeds in our country.
So it's been 26 years, and how has this program been faring in Australia so far?
Oh, well, it went from strength to strength.
Right.
If you wonder why my accent is French.
Yes. We couldn't tell.
Sometimes I have some difficulty to say some words.
No worries.
So now we have 100 local seed networks, smaller groups around Australia. We've decentralised, and we've received nearly 9,000 samples of seeds from the Australian public and redistributed 500,000 of them in little seed packets.
So how would you define a local variety, say for one in Australia versus one in Malaysia?
I think it's similar all the way world around, that a local variety is one that's adapted to the climate and to the culture and needs of the local people. Now, it could have been introduced recently and they've adapted it to their gardening conditions or their requirements themselves, or it could be something that's been there for hundreds of years. We've just been in Portugal, France and Spain, and we've seen farmers with wonderful old varieties, named varieties that are very regional. And I'm sure that's the same in Malaysia. There's things that exist, especially in remote areas.
Right, and how does it differentiate? Some of these are obviously more suitable for home gardening compared to, say, modern commercial varieties. How do you determine which is better for which?
Well, local variety usually shows it, like it's full of characteristics, like one variety is colorful usually, like for carrots, for example.
Right. Okay.
In Afghanistan, carrots are purple. And they're very yellow, and carrots from Himalayas, where they are a native of, where they've been domesticated by indigenous people and by local people.
And they're red there, aren't they?
They're red in that country, deep red. And there's antioxidants and pigments are working together. So you can recognize actually nutrition with the color of a vegetable.
I think a big difference between a local variety and modern commercial varieties is taste, and therefore nutrition, and also density of taste and nutrition, and that they're more rustic, they're more variable. Whereas modern varieties are made from monoculture, they're all the same,
looks the same,
and they're all harvested at once, and they're all taken to the supermarket where they all look the same. Whereas a local variety has a lot of character, like Michel said, a lot of rusticity, if you like.
Rusticity.
Okay, so how are we hoping to employ this here in Malaysia, Sabina?
Yesterday, 2 days back, we had the launch of Eats, Shoots and Roots, and at the same time, we screened our seeds documentary that Michel and Jude have produced, and we had our first seed swap. And we had about 25 different varieties of seeds exchanging hands during our seed swap. We had about 50 people attending. And so we've planted that seed consciousness. And it's been around for the longest time.
Right.
People have been exchanging seeds. Grandmothers pass it down to their grandchildren. It's happening everywhere in a very informal sense. Probably there's also some formal seed exchange going on. And we just want to enhance to that what's existing already. We are planning to set up community gardens, and these community gardens will be our archive for our seeds, our library, and from
Right.
there we'll be passing it on to people.
Okay, and whereabouts these community seed banks that you plan to set up? Whereabouts do you plan to do it?
Well, we're planning to be based in the Klang Valley.
Okay.
So we've identified so far 3 different areas that we want to set up gardens, and eventually we want to expand.
To the rest of course, West
Yes,
Malaysia and even East.
to whoever that's interested. We want
Right.
to work with communities, yeah? So anyone who's interested, a group of people, will help them to design those gardens and build those gardens.
Okay.
Schools, for example.
Yeah, schools are a great place to
Yes.
start.
That's a great place to start, because they have, the children go back to
Yeah,
their
go back to your
kampongs,
homes and
they
they'll bring
collect
the
the
seeds.
seeds and they bring them back.
Yeah.
Okay, so what kind of seeds would someone like who's never done this before be looking for?
Yeah.
Well, basil's a good one to start with. You could grow it even on a balcony in an apartment. And there's lots of varieties of basil in Malaysia. Your Thai, your Vietnamese,
That's
your
right.
all your local, your Indian tulsi, and so on. So and it's quite easy to show children. They go to seeds reasonably readily, and you just collect those little ball-like seeds and replant them, and they grow quite easily from seed.
And a lot of food just tastes better with some basil in
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
So kids can also enjoy different tastes
Yeah.
in their home cooked food.
Now,
Excellent.
one of the sites I was reading actually yesterday was one of the tips was to be careful to keep your seeds separate,
Separate, yeah.
otherwise they end up
Crossing. This is not true of basil so much, but or tomatoes or beans or lettuces. They're all self-pollinating, meaning that the flower reproduces in
Themselves,
itself, quickly before opening, in fact. But cross-pollinating ones, like all the choy sums and chok bok choy and so on, all those choys, they will easily cross with one another.
Oh, okay. That's good to
They're
know.
a bit more difficult. Mustard, for example, you get a hot surprise. It'll come in and the pollen will contaminate your choy sum.
Okay,
or
so
bok
in
choy.
that case, if you were to grow these type of vegetables, you got to be very careful in terms of separating the seeds and make sure that they
Well, there's some. You should start with easy ones,
Okay.
like the ones I mentioned:
Yeah,
tomatoes,
tomatoes,
beans, lettuce,
peas,
and lots of
lettuce.
herbs too.
You can separate them in time, like you can grow one variety
This
and then
month
another one later.
Okay. Now, there's an issue, especially with urban homes, is space. We don't have the luxury of space. So, how does one go about, maximizing, their garden without sacrificing too much space?
Well, if you're in a flat, an apartment, you can use the balcony pots. We've seen amazing examples of spaces smaller than this where beans are growing and cucumbers are falling off the vines and so on. And vertical space is easy to use in a
Okay.
city, and also, of course, community gardens. Yeah.
Yeah, or container gardens. So you don't even have to have land sometimes. You can just
Okay.
grow in containers.
Okay.
And we're also going to be running some courses to teach people how to grow in containers.
Okay.
Yeah.
And where do you plan or when do you plan to have these courses so that people can sign up?
Well, we have one every month. We're planning to have one every month.
Okay.
So there's one in February, one in March. We have a biofertile soils workshop coming up, and then we have container gardening in in April, and an introduction to permaculture in February.
Okay. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of things planned for
There's
the
lots of
early
things
part of
planned.
the year.
We have a really great site for conducting our courses, which is sort of like a 1 acre site next to the La Salle School, and that's one of our community garden sites as well. We want to start to involve the school children in
And this is
gardening.
La Salle in PJ?
Yes, in
Yes.
PJ.
Ah, okay.
And it's-
Fantastic. Is there a website that
Yeah.
people can go to for Eat Shoots Roots in Malaysia?
Yes, it's www.eatsandroots.org.
Yes, so Eats, Shoots and Roots. But
.org.
once you've established this, what does a local seed network actually do within a community? How does it all work?
Well, usually they're volunteers, and they're people like homemakers, professionals, or, people who have time on the weekend, for example, to go and find local varieties often from older people. It'll be older people in backyards or up valleys that have these varieties. So finding that's the first job. Secondly, to multiply them in your own garden and then to swap them at events like their events or just little meetings where one example was some mothers who got together after school in Australia, and every week they would meet on a Thursday afternoon after school, and they would have something to eat and then swap with planting planting material with one another.
Oh.
That's a point of collection. And it's also a point where people can drop varieties, even if they are vegetatively propagated, like taro, like
Yam.
cassava, like yams,
Or turmeric, yeah.
like pineapple as well,
Oh,
Air
okay.
potato.
all the
Air
gingers.
potato, yes.
Now we have
That's
a
what
wealth
it
of.
I was trying to figure out what that was. Looks like a rock to me.
An air potato.
We're only looking at those plants because we,
Turmeric,
we
yeah.
never take them back anywhere. We never
Right.
move a seed from one place to the next.
No.
True.
Oh, right.
But we organize people. That's right, yes.
We've worked in 40 countries, but none of them have we taken seed from one country to another. Each country has plenty,
Yeah.
especially
Of
Malaysia.
diversity.
And I know, like with Australia, they're quite protective in terms of
Yes.
what seeds
Agriculture,
and
yeah.
agriculture, like what
Very.
We've
comes
had
in.
an embarrassment of seeds in Australia. We don't want any more. There's plenty there.
Now, you've also produced,
Yes.
as Mina said, a documentary.
Yes, this
Tell
one.
us about that.
We showed it on Saturday evening, and
Okay.
Sabina has copies of it. It's our seeds, and we made it for the people of Melanesia, of the Pacific. But it has a lot of application in Malaysia because they're tropical crops.
Right.
Right.
And it's 1 hour documentary.
And what do you talk about in the documentary?
Well, we filmed it in 11 countries, and it's about how it's really important to keep your traditional varieties rather than be tempted towards fatty, starchy, denatured food.
Right.
This in the Pacific. In the Pacific,
Processed,
people
that's
eat very naturally from their gardens, but of course, when they come to town, they eat rice, biscuits, soft drinks, noodles. You know.
Right.
Yeah.
And then they get problems like diabetes, obesity, and
obesity and stuff like that. Okay.
We see Malaysian kampong as a really beautiful place for us. It's full of fruit and vegetables, and people seem to be so relaxed and so happy. And still in cities, still people are still beautiful in Malaysia. You feel people are relaxed, even though they live in an urban environment.
Right.
But I must say that the kampong is really where our heart is.
Right.
And I'm sure that every Malaysian person has got some relatives in a kampong, and sometimes they say, oh, I'm going to go and see my grandma, my grandpa. Yeah. And that's where maybe they can find some of those varieties.
Yeah.
For sure,
At
for
the
sure.
same time, I mean, the city has to be our kampong as well for many
Yeah.
of us, you know. So it's about kampong-fying the city, you know.
Kampong-fying
yeah,
the city.
bring the plants, bring the diversity from the kampong, and reintroduce them in the cities, and use it as a base for connecting people.
I think the key thing is being exposed, because I remember growing up in Seremban, my house, we used to grow, we tried to grow things, like
Yeah.
fruits, some vegetable, whatever we can, but I think the key point is that there needs to be some form of exposure first, either through schools or maybe just parents, like after eating, we used to eating the papaya, my dad would keep the seeds and say,
Keep the
hey,
seeds.
and throw it in the
Plant
back.
them, exactly.
And then if it sprouts, like, oh, look, amazing, something grows. And as a kid, when you see something grows, you kind of like, wow,
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
life
Nice,
right there.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's amazing how much children these days have become quite disconnected with their food. Like I heard this one story. They asked.
They probably think all food comes from the shops.
Exactly. They asked the school kid to draw a chicken, and she drew a drumstick.
Yeah, the chicken egg story.
Draw a cow and I'll draw a piece of steak.
Well, thank you so much for your time. If you'd like information on the Seedsavers or how to start doing this, you can actually log on to www.seedsavers.net. You can also find them on Facebook.
And YouTube as well. So log on to facebook.com/Seedsavers Network or youtube.com/Seedsavers.
And of course, at Eats, Shoots and Roots here in Malaysia for our local initiative. Thank you both for joining us, and enjoy
you.
the kampongs
Yeah.
in Malaysia.
Okay, we're going to hit the pause button right now, but still to come, the Malaysian story through the lens of our photojournalists.
Yes, a sneak peek at that exhibition right after these messages.